Today we'll be looking at the best performing decks from a large tournament in Japan with Stellar Crown cards legal. We'll begin with decks that finished 8-0, and these players who finished 8-0 earned a round 1 bye at the upcoming Champions League. The first deck we'll look at is a Dragapult EX Pidgeot EX deck with the Shrouded Fable, Dusclops, and Dusknoir line in it. Dragapult EX in the World Shrouded Fable format was not that great of a contender, but there are some new cards from Stellar Crown that are really going to boost this archetype. The most important one being the new A-Spec tool, Sparkling Crystal. It reads the attacks of the Terra Pokemon this card is attached to cost 1 less of any type of energy. So that means that Dragapult EX with this Sparkling Crystal tool attached to it, the Phantom Dive will only cost either a Fire Energy or a Psychic Energy to use. Just 1 energy to use Phantom Dive, one of the strongest, most efficient ways to spread a lot of damage around the board in a really meaningful way in this format. We know that Regidrago V-Star uses that Phantom Dive attack as one of its main attacks. Now Dragapult EX can actually use it on its own really efficiently due to this Sparkling Crystal tool. In addition, we have the new Crispin supporter card, which is also going to help Dragapult EX attack more consistently and more efficiently. This Crispin supporter card reads, search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types, so similar to Mirage Gate and also really working well with Dragapult because it uses Fire and Psychic. And then you put one of those energies into your hand, attach the other energy to one of your Pokemon. So this can search for both the Fire and Psychic that you need. It automatically attaches one of them, and it puts the other into your hand. So if you haven't already attached for turn, you also have your manual attachment now. So this Crispin card is really good. It looks like it was almost made exactly for Dragapult EX. And then the last brand new card in this deck list is Briar, another new supporter card. You can only use it if your opponent has exactly 2 price cards remaining, and the effect is that during this turn, if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack used by one of your Terra Pokemon, which would be Dragapult, and this card is going to be included in several different archetypes with attacking Terra Pokemon. It'll be included in Charizard EX for sure, but what I really like about it in Dragapult is that Dragapult has the potential to finish knocking out the active Roblox Pokemon and also finish knocking out maybe a single prize Pokemon on the bench, which would normally give you 3 prize cards. But now with Briar, you're going to get 4 prize cards for that play, which is a really big difference because maybe earlier on you can knock out like a Rotom or a Lumineon or a Squawkabilly or a Pheasantipity, a support Pokemon for 2 prizes, and then finish off the game with this Briar taking a surprise extra prize card. Next up with the 8-0 deck lists, we have Lugia V-Star. Pretty consistently across the Lugia V-Star deck lists that I'm seeing from this format, I'm seeing very high counts of the Cinccino line. I know in the NAIC format and even in the Worlds format, we saw people either completely omitting the Cinccino line or going down to thinner counts of it, either 2-2 or 1-1. But I'm more consistently now seeing 3-3 lines and even 4-3 lines of the Cinccino in the Stellar Crown format Lugia deck lists. Now, this could maybe just be a deck building difference that Japanese players have or what their preference is for the deck, or it could be a reflection on how Lugia is shaping up in this new metagame. And here we have one more Lugia deck at 8-0. You'll see here, this is running the 4-3 line of Cinccino like I was talking about. But these Lugia deck lists don't really have much variation between them. It looks like players in Japan are pretty settled on what the deck lists should look like and what tech Pokemon to include. These Lugia deck lists seem to be much less teched than the Lugia lists we've seen at NAIC and Worlds, but of course that is a different format, and also Japan plays best of 1, so maybe that also has something to do with the more refined and consolidated versions of these Lugia deck lists. Next, we have a pretty big surprise with an 8-0 Lawson Giratina V-Star deck list. Now, this is actually including 0 new cards from Stellar Crown, just like the Lugia deck lists. This is another old one. But we do have some interesting inclusions that we could talk about here. You've got the Forest Seal Stone, which Japanese players have seemed to always like in Giratina, and we've rarely seen it outside of Japanese players' deck lists. And then we also have both the Blood Moon Ursaluna and the Iron Leaves EX. So really respecting Charizard EX with the Iron Leaves EX, but also wanting that pseudo Radiant Charizard-like attacker in Blood Moon Ursaluna. High HP, high damage output, very low energy cost towards the end of the game. And as we go through these deck lists, a couple of things to keep in mind. Like I said, these are from a 8-round best-of-1 tournament, with the goal to be finish 8-0 to get a round 1 bye at Champions League, or finish 7-1 to get priority registration for the Champions League. So it's best of 1. Players are probably looking for some more surprise factors and also some more consistency. And also remember, this is with Stellar Crown legal, which Worlds did not have. Baltimore Regionals will also not have Stellar Crown legal. So the format, the metagame is shifting around a little bit. And the most notable thing is that Regidrago V-Star isn't as overtly powerful anymore because there are more decks and more cards that can combat it a little bit better than they could in the Shrouded Fable format. And of course, next we do have a Regidrago V-Star deck that finished 8-0. This Regidrago V-Star deck list is probably going to look very plain, nothing new from Stellar Crown. The weird thing is that they played 3 Dragapult EX, maybe again speaking to that part of, you know, consistency, best of 1, just looking for a streamlined deck that can do the same thing every game. I'm not a fan of playing 3 Dragapult EX. I definitely don't think that's necessary. I'd rather either play a 4th Earthen Vessel or a Hisuian Goodra V-Star. So yeah, not a huge fan of this list, but it's not necessarily bad. Just looks like it has a little bit of a misplaced consistency with that 3rd Dragapult EX. And next we've got Roaring Moon EX. This one's using 2 of the baby Roaring Moon and also the Binding Mochi tool card, so that when your Pecharunt EX poisons your dark Pokemon to bring it up to the active, you can also attach that tool card to do extra damage. That could be really nice with the Roaring Moon EX's Calamity Storm, but could also be really nice to boost the baby Roaring Moon's Vengeance Fletching. Maybe reach some numbers the opponent will not expect you to be able to hit in this build of the deck, since it's not really built to get to high numbers with Vengeance Fletching like something like Ancient Box is. But yeah, Roaring Moon EX using the Pecharunt EX and the Pheasantipede EX as kind of the new baseline support for this archetype is really good. We know that it got 2nd place at Worlds. Looks like it continues to be a strong turbo-aggressive archetype. They're playing that 1 water energy. Just something I was mentioning earlier was, you know, people might want consistency and people might also want a surprise factor. So if you discard that water energy early on, that might make people bench Manaphy, play differently because they're worried about a Moonlight Shuriken. But in reality, this deck can't actually use Moonlight Shuriken because it only plays the 1 water energy. This is a tactic we've seen in the past with Roaring Moon decks and also in Lost Zone Giratina decks, playing like that 1 water energy just to scare the opponent. I'm not really sure I love that. You could probably just make a better choice of 60th card instead of that 1 water energy, but it's a funny inclusion, so I wanted to definitely note it. One other thing to note about this Roaring Moon deck list is that they play Unfair Stamp instead of Prime Catcher. They are playing 4 Pokemon Catcher and a Boss's Orders, and of course also the Pal Pad, so you could potentially reuse the Boss's Orders. But Unfair Stamp is actually something I've seen popping up in Raging Bolt deck lists as well, kind of surprising opponents with this disruption in an otherwise very aggressive deck. So very interesting choice of A-Spec here for the Roaring Moon list. Additionally, there was also an 8-0 Raging Bolt and 2 8-0 Snorlax stall decks, but the lists for those have not been shared. Now we'll move on to the 7-1 record deck lists, and we have a lot of these. The 7-1 record earned players priority registration for the upcoming Champions League, and note that I won't be reviewing every single deck list for this section, since there are a lot of copies, several Lugia, Dragapult, Charizard, and Raging Bolt lists that are nearly identical. But I'm going to show deck lists for the variants that have differences between them, at least one deck list for every archetype listed, and multiple for some that have a lot of differences. But also, please follow the link to Pokemeshi.com in the description if you'd like to see the full results, and also the lists that got like 6 and 2, 5 and 3, and other records as well. We're starting off the 7-in-1 deck lists with something that's not exactly an established archetype. It's Aegislash control. So you might remember this Aegislash from Paradox Rift with the ability Mysterious Shield. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX and V. And then has the hard bashing attack, which does 120 and goes through effects. So this is a stage 2 with the kind of effect that Mimikyu has. They are also playing Mimikyu in here. But the Aegislash also does a little more damage than Mimikyu can, and it also has more health than Mimikyu has. So a very interesting decision on how to build a control and kind of wall style deck. But also we got to look at this with some validity, because it did finish 7-1 in a tournament where players are playing for a pretty prestigious prize, which is guaranteed registration into a massive tournament, and the 8-0 players, of course, receiving a round 1 bye in said tournament. Something I also want to note here is something you'll notice across the board with the more stall or control style decks that we'll look at in these 7-in-1 deck lists, is that they are playing a lot more energy than we typically see in control style decks from the East. Is that they're playing a lot more energy cards than we would typically see from a control style deck in the West. And I think that is because of the best of one no tie rules. If the game doesn't finish in that best of one, it's a double game loss. So players want to make sure that they can take all of their prize cards or deck out their opponent or whatever it is that they're trying to do. So I think that's why we see more energy cards, because it's more important to be able to end the game on command rather than just like wall out your opponent and wait for them to deck out or something. But yeah, so actually 0 new cards in this Aegislash control deck list. Like I said, these all finished 7-1. So let's continue on to the next 7-1 deck list, which is going to be Ancient Box. Now, Ancient Box actually had a pretty good matchup spread going into Worlds. Has a good matchup spread still going into Baltimore Regionals. Now, this is in Stellar Crown format, of course, but this is going to include exactly 0 Stellar Crown cards. So this is still the same kind of Ancient Box deck list you could play right now, you know, for Baltimore Regionals. It doesn't include any of the new cards. And while I do think that this deck can be kind of clunky and have some consistency issues and just be overall not that strong in the early game, it is a deck that has a really good matchup spread because the current metagame is so centralized around like V and V-Star and basic EX Pokemon. A lot of 2-prize Pokemon, a lot of 2-prize liabilities on the board in the form of support Pokemon as well, which is why Ancient Box is actually not that bad right now. Next is a deck archetype you probably haven't seen or heard of for a while, and that is Arceus Giratina V-Star. To explain this one away a little bit, you know, I always say that anyone and any deck can succeed, can win, as long as the deck is functional and is ready for the metagame and has some sort of powerful win condition. But Arceus Giratina is a deck that has seemingly fallen off the face of the earth. I'm sure there's probably people out there who just thought the deck was like not even in standard format or something anymore, just because we haven't seen Arceus Giratina in so long. This Arceus Giratina list is using exactly 1 new card, which is that Crispin supporter card. So that can help you make up for whiffing a turn 1 energy attachment, or even just helping you get more energies onto the board to be able to use Lost Impact, or even like Radiant Charizard or Blood Moon Ursaluna ahead of schedule. Something important to note here is that they're using 2 Technical Machine de-evolution. So they went into this knowing that they were going to have to face off against stage 2 decks. Like Dragapult EX and Charizard EX are both very, very strong in the Stellar Crown format. I already talked about Dragapult EX getting stronger with the new Sparkling Crystal and the new Crispin supporter. Charizard gets stronger with some new supporters as well, but also just because of the metagame changing and Regidrago V-Star not being anywhere near as dominant as it was in the Shrouded Fable format. Next, we have Dragapult EX with Xatu. So because of the Xatu that can accelerate energy cards, this variant of the deck isn't going to need that Sparkling Crystal, also not going to be playing that new Crispin supporter card, as well as no Mela or any other way to accelerate energy cards because of the Xatu being able to do that. Now, Dragapult Xatu is one of those decks that have seemed to stick around in Japan. Even when Dragapult EX first came out, it seems like Japan was higher on this archetype than tournament results have shown in NAIC and Worlds that other players were. I don't think this is the best way to play Dragapult EX, but we've seen that over in Japan it is able to succeed, and people seem to really like this build of the deck. I'm going to be looking more towards the Sparkling Crystal variants of Dragapult with Pidgeot EX and the new Crispin supporter, but it seems like this one's still viable and can succeed getting that 7-1 record at this tournament. And then we have some more Dragapult EX. This is going to be with the Dusclops, Dusknoir, with the Pidgeot EX line, and with those other new cards we already talked about with Sparkling Crystal, the new Crispin supporter to accelerate and find energy cards, and then of course Briar to give you that very specific but very useful extra prize card so long as you're knocking out the active with damage from a Terra Pokemon and that your opponent is at exactly 2 prize cards remaining. Then we've got some Gardevoir EX action going on, and this is quite an interesting deck list. They're playing a heavier line of Gardevoir EX and Munkidori, pretty much treating this as an attacking Gardevoir EX deck, also using those 2 Professor Tauros. So with the 3 Gardevoir EX, the 3 Munkidori, and the 3 Darkness Energy, you can more consistently use Gardevoir EX as an attacker that's essentially outputting 220 or 250 damage a turn with the help of Munkidori. And so you don't have other backup attackers in here. They're not playing Screamtail, they're not playing Cresselia, they're not playing Drifloon and Bravery Charm. The only backup attacker here really is that Fluttermane. Of course, also Munkidori can be an attacker as well. In addition to all that, this deck list is not playing any new cards from Stellar Crown. So we'll move on to the next Gardevoir EX deck list. This one is playing exactly 1 new card from Stellar Crown, which is going to be that Gravity Orb Tool card. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, each player's active Pokemon retreat cost is 1 more. Now, raising the opponent's retreat cost is pretty cool in Gardevoir, because what you can do is like counter catcher something up and put Fluttermane up there in the active, attach this Gravity Orb to Fluttermane, and then start spreading around damage. This is a tactic that was used against Charizard decks, where you would counter catcher up Bibarel. Bibarel has 2 retreat, so it'd be hard to get out of the active, and you had Fluttermane up there, so they can't actually use the Fluttermane. Then you Devo their Pidgeot EX, so they don't have Quick Search anymore. But that is less likely to happen now with more Charizard EX decks playing Pheasantipity, which only has 1 retreat cost. So I do really like the Gravity Orb Tool card included for that reason. Some other unique inclusions here, we've got the Eri, and also the Neutralization Center, that A-Spec Stadium card that says your Pokemon without rule boxes can't be damaged by your opponent's Pokemon with rule boxes. Next, we've got an Iron Thorns EX deck. Of course, this is the archetype that just won the World Championships in the Masters division. This deck list of Iron Thorns EX is playing a couple interesting cards. So not brand new, but from Shrouded Fable is that Dangerous Laser A-Spec, which has seen pretty much no competitive success yet, and not a lot of competitive speculation either. It's simply an item card that says your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned and confused, and that could be pretty annoying on top of all the other stuff that Iron Thorns EX has going for it, of course, with that ability that's going to turn off all of your opponent's rule box abilities. As for brand new cards from Stellar Crown, we've got that Gravity Orb tool, which is another annoying thing that Iron Thorns EX can throw into the mix, but also the new Kofu supporter card, which says to put 2 cards from your hand onto the bottom of your deck and then draw 4 cards. So this is pretty good when you don't want to judge or Iono because your opponent has a bad hand and you just want to keep on building up your own hand. So you put 2 cards you don't need anymore at the bottom and then draw 4, keep building that hand, keeping the resources that you already had available. Next, we've got some more Lugia V-Star. This one at the 7-1 record, of course, like the rest of the decks we're looking at in this section. And there were many more Lugias at 7-1, but they all look so similar that we're just going to look at this one to encapsulate all of them. Again, like I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of the 4-3 line of Cinccino, and then a very low amount of other tech cards. Pretty much your attackers here are Cinccino, Blood Moon Ursaluna, Iron Hands, Lugia V-Star. We don't see any Weird Ear, no Wellspring Mask, Ogerpon EX, keeping it simple and consistent, as much consistency as you can get into Lugia V-Star, really. Next, we've got some Lost Zone stuff at the 7-1 record. We've got a Lost Zone Dragapult EX deck with Radiant Charizard. This is going to be like the variant that was running around a lot before and at NAIC. But that variant kind of flopped. It didn't really perform like people were thinking it would. The idea behind it is that you can present a fully single prize board state until you're ready to go into your Dragapult EXs, and then you have a very powerful Stage 2 EX Pokemon, and then the rest of your board's still those single prizers, so they'll have to deal with the Dragapult EX at some point. But it does have some of those issues left over from the Lost Zone engine, you know, susceptible to disruption, susceptible to slow starts. Also not playing specific energy acceleration like that Crispin or the Sparkling Crystal, but when you play Lost Zone combined with Dragapult, you actually get the Mirage Gate. So now you can just accelerate energy onto your Dragapults with the Mirage Gate. So this is a deck that looks like it might still be surviving a little bit in Japan's meta. We'll have to see if it comes back for the rest of the world with Stellar Crown. But no new Stellar Crown cards in this specific deck list. And next we have some more Lost Zone Sablezard stuff, but this time without the Dragapult EX. And again, no new cards, although they are playing the Neutralization Zone A-Spec Stadium, which we just looked at a Gardevoir EX deck list, preventing damage done to your non-rule box Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon with rule boxes. So if the opponent is either playing no Stadium cards or they've already used their Stadium cards, this Neutralization Zone can potentially just shut your opponent out. Something really cool they are playing in this deck list is the Iron Valiant EX for that Tachyon Bits ability to get some extra damage in on the opponent's board. Now we have another control style, wall style deck like that Aegislash control deck that we looked at. And like I mentioned, you'll see that these control or wall style decks are playing a lot of energy, which is something that we're not so used to in the Western meta. And like I said earlier, I think that is because you're forced to finish games in this best of one, no tie environment. So at a glance, this deck doesn't really look that good. I suppose if you just have an endless supply of Mimikyu and Cornerstone Ogerpons, and you're against a deck that can get like through one or two of them with a Canceling Cologne, or with like one attacker with very low HP, then you can really wall out those decks, because you can just knock out their attackers to get through your Pokemon, and also just like one Canceling Cologne isn't going to do it if you just have more Mimikyus or more Cornerstone Mask Ogerpons to send up. And this deck also looks very focused on making sure you're attacking all the time, getting energy in there, being aggressive with these wall Pokemon. The Gutsy Pickaxe that can accelerate energy, as well as the new Crispin supporter card that we know can accelerate energy, as well as, like I said, a high energy count, 11 energies, 9 basic and 2 special, and then also having the 2 Earthen Vessels to help find those energy cards as well. Aside from the Crispin supporter, the new card in this is an A-Spec tool, the Lux Bomb. The Lux Bomb reads, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active and is damaged by an attack, even if it's knocked out, put 12 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon, then discard this card. So that's pretty good. I don't see the exception on this A-Spec that says like it can't be put back into your deck like some of them say. So you could actually consider running like a Roseanne's backup in this. They do play Silene, however, so could get that Deluxe Bomb back with Silene. Next is Miraidon, and something very interesting about Miraidon decks in Stellar Crown is that they play that Terastal Mewtwo EX card, even though the Terastal Mewtwo EX attacks for Psychic Energy and you can never attack with it. It's a Lightning type Pokemon that you can search out with Miraidon EX's Tandem unit, and it's Terastal, so it works with the brand new Stadium card Area Zero Underdepths. Each player who has a Terra Pokemon in play can have up to 8 Pokemon on their bench. So you'll see here that there's now 3 Miraidon EX. A lot of Miraidon EX lists recently have gone down to just 2 because you don't have the bench space to put all that down. But with the Mewtwo EX involved and the Area Zero Underdepths to give you essentially Skyfield Stadium 8 bench spots, you can have all your support Pokemon, all your attackers, even have some room left over for an Iron Bundle or something. So a really cool development in Miraidon EX decks. That's not all, however. You might remember that Miraidon EX decks were playing the Peony supporter card back before rotation, and Shrouded Fable brought us a supporter card called Cassiopeia. It says you can only use this card when it's the last card in your hand, and you could search your deck for any 2 cards and put them into your hand. So this is pretty busted, especially with a lot of ways to get your hand size down. You got Secret Box, you got Ultra Balls, Electric Generators, which are going to spam down, very low count of supporter cards, just the 2 Cassiopeia and 3 Boss's Orders, 3 Forest Seal Stones, so those are cards you can just play out of your hand, but also play down to a V Pokemon to get any Pokemon, or sorry, any card that you want. So a really interesting build of Miraidon EX, and I'm excited to look into this more as we get closer to Stellar Crown being released everywhere. Next, we've got Palkia V-Star, and typically we're going to be seeing Palkia V-Star paired with the new Terapagos EX. And the Area Zero Underdepth Stadium, and we will look at that in just a moment. But this interesting 7-in-1 record Palkia V-Star deck list is very different than the others that I've seen from Japan. Of course, Palkia V-Star is a pretty good beat stick attacker, reaching up to around the 260 damage range, also having Star Portal, which is good to accelerate energy to itself, or Radiant Greninja, or Chien-Pao EX. But then the interesting stuff here comes in the form of the Iron Valiant EX, which they are playing 2 of, and they're also playing 2 Future Booster Energy Capsule to make that Pokemon have free retreat so it can move very easily. And then they also are playing 2 Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon as their Terra Pokemon to activate the Area Zero Underdepth Stadium, which they are playing 3 of. Now, the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon cannot attack at all, which I do think is kind of odd. Like, you could even just include like 1 Luminous Energy or 1 Fighting Energy, something like that. But what I think they're doing here with it is, in the early turns, they are setting up their board, maybe getting in a couple of Tachyon bits, and then retreating back into the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, which is going to potentially wall for a turn while also activating your Area Zero Underdepth so you can fill up your board. And then from there, Area Zero Underdepths is going to make your Palkia V-Star's attack do a lot more damage. You know, you can fit 3 extra Pokemon on your bench, and if your opponent also has Terra Pokemon, they can fit 3 more Pokemon onto their bench. So that's going to boost the Palkia V-Star damage output, while also potentially giving yourself a little bit of a wall for those early turns, and the Iron Valiant being able to ping and set up extra damage where you want it. So an interesting variant. The Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon is kind of confusing here, but I can see at least some ideas of what they're trying to go for with it. Now, this next Palkia V-Star deck list, this is what I expect the Palkia V-Star deck lists to look like more. Like I said, that Terapagos EX is going to be one of the main new cards from Stellar Crown. It's a 230 HP basic Pokemon, and the only attack from it that we'll be using in the Palkia deck is Union Beat, which says you can't use this on your first turn going second, but otherwise it's just a pretty strong attack for 2 colorless energy. It does 30 damage for each of your benched Pokemon. So if you have the full 8 benched Pokemon with the Area Zero Underdepths, the Union Beat does 240 damage for 2 energy on a basic Pokemon, which is pretty good. You'll see that new Glass Trumpet item card that goes really well with Terapagos. You can only use it if you have a Terra Pokemon in play, so this set is really pushing that idea of Terra Pokemon being more than just that tag that says they can't be damaged on the bench. Now we're actually getting some mechanics for these Terra Pokemon. Choose up to 2 of your benched colorless Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them. So that could be attached to 2 Terapagos, most likely, so that they're each 1 energy away from being able to attack. And then this is also playing a 3/3 line of Noctowl and 2 of the new Fan Rotom. So the Fan Rotom is really cool. You can only use it on your first turn, but you could search your deck for up to 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less and put them into your hand, and that's going to include Bidoof, the Hoot, and also Noctowl. So let's find out what this Noctowl does. Noctowl has the ability Treasure Hunting. If you have a Terra Pokemon in play, which we likely will with that Terapagos EX, you may use this ability when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve your Pokemon. Search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards and put them into your hand. 2 trainer cards, not even just item cards. So this is a very, very powerful ability. As long as you have your Terapagos EX on the board, when you evolve Hoot into this Noctowl, you get 2 trainer cards. And there's a 3/3 line of Noctowl. The fan Rotoms can find it on turn 1. You can either set up your board of Hoots, or if you already have Hoots, you can grab Noctowls to hold for next turn. Very, very good engine that I'm excited to play with. Next, we've got some Raging Bolt deck lists at 7 and 1, and we're going to show off a few different ways that people are playing Raging Bolt over in Japan, especially because the 8 and 0 deck list wasn't shared. Keep in mind that Teal Mask Ogerpon is a Terra Pokemon, so this deck is going to benefit from the Noctowl that we just looked at, and it's also going to play that fan Rotom as well, and the Area Zero Underdepth, so you could just have a really large board. And what's actually pretty cool is the Glass Trumpet that I was talking about that you can use to accelerate energy onto your Terapagos. So you can use that to accelerate energies onto the Hoot, the Noctowl, the Fan Rotom, even your Squawkabilly EX, and then discard those energies for Raging Bolt's attack to do more damage. So I think that is actually a really cool use of the Glass Trumpet card, because it could look a little confusing why it's in here at first, but a pretty cool 2 energies onto the board out of nowhere for the Raging Bolt's Bellowing Thunder attack to use. Also note that they're playing the Crispin supporter card here, which can kind of act as like a 5th Professor Sada's. You know, if you can't find Professor Sada's, you can at least find the Crispin to accelerate 1 energy to your Raging Bolt, and then grab the other one from your deck to attach manually. This is more of a typical looking Raging Bolt deck list, without the Noctowls, the Fan Rotoms, without the Area Zero Underdepths, playing Pokestop here. But it does have 2 new cards in this deck list, the Crispin, which we just talked about, and also the Briar supporter card. So the Briar supporter card isn't going to work for Raging Bolt, because Raging Bolt isn't a Terra Pokemon, but if you could weave in Teal Mask Ogerpon EX as an attacker at some point to finish up a knockout, or even just one-shot something, and your opponent's at 2 prize cards, you could use Briar to make that attack now take an extra prize card from the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. So pretty cool inclusion. I'm not sure if it's too practical. I haven't played at all with Stellar Crown format yet. My next tournament's Baltimore, so I'm still pretty focused on the current Shrouded Fable format. Cool, thought-provoking inclusion at the very least. Here we have another Raging Bolt EX deck list. With that Noctowl line, this one not including the Fan Rotom, not including the Glass Trumpet, but it is using the Area Zero Underdepth Stadium to expand your bench size. And Raging Bolt is a deck that wants an expanded bench. Like, you're not doing more damage because of your bench size or anything, but it's nice to have as many Teal Masks as you want. Have room so that you can use that Squawkabilly early. Have room for the Radiant Greninja and the Fezandipity. So the extra bench spots are really, really cool for this deck. And then if the opponent replaces the Stadium, you can just get rid of your weaker support Pokemon, or things that you don't need anymore, like Noctowls that have already served their purpose. And for the last Raging Bolt deck list, this one is as normal as it gets, pretty much. Absolutely zero new cards, but they all finished 7-1, just showing that Raging Bolt Ogerpon is a strong archetype in general. Doesn't really matter too much how you're building the deck list. It's going to be a good deck. At least that's what these results are showing us. So pretty normal looking deck list. Just wanted to highlight that there's a lot of ways to build the deck, and all of them seem to be doing pretty well in Japan. Then we've got 2 Regidrago V-Star deck lists to show at the 7-1 record. This one we're looking at here, 0 new cards. They're choosing the Jamming Tower instead of Temple of Sinnoh. That can work against Dragapult EX with that Sparkling Crystal. Can also work against some of the other A-Spec tools and just generally against tool cards that we've looked at today. A lot of the Regidrago V-Star deck lists I'm seeing from Japan are omitting Hisui and Goodra V-Star. I'm still a fan of Hisui and Goodra V-Star. I think Rolling Iron's just a really great attack to jam. When you don't have a better attack to use, you can reduce damage and avoid one-hit KOs. This deck list is playing Thorton, which is a cool card to try in Regidrago V-Star. It's not the norm per se, but I think I played against 3 Regidragos at Worlds, and 2 of them were playing Thorton. So it is out there. It is being played in Regidrago deck lists. And then we have another Regidrago V-Star here at 7-1. This one is playing Hisui and Goodra V-Star, and it's also playing the Noivern EX. Probably to try to combat Ancient Box and other basic focus decks like Raging Bolt. I don't think it's honestly that good against either of them because both decks play gusting effects. Ancient Box plays Iron Bundle. Sometimes Raging Bolt plays Iron Bundle. I'm not a huge fan of the Noivern EX. But they are also playing the new Crispin supporter card here to help with energy acceleration, which probably seems fine. Earthen Vessel is a consistency card because it finds you grass energies to Teal Dance with. It also is a way to discard your dragons into the discard pile. But the Crispin supporter card's really cool. I'm looking forward to trying it out in a lot of different decks. So here we have another Roaring Moon EX deck list, and this one's actually looking more similar to one that I shared on Twitter last week or maybe a week and a half ago, saying that this is something that I started testing shortly before Worlds, but it was undercooked. I just stuck with Regidrago V-Star. But the 3 water energies are cool against decks like Dragapult, against Zard, against Guardy, because with the 4 energy switches, with the Professor Sadas, you can actually attack with Moonlight Shuriken on turn 1. So that's always something cool to be threatening. We saw in one of the other Roaring Moon deck lists, I believe, they just played the 1 water energy to kind of scare opponents. But this one's committing and playing the full 3 so that you can actually attack with Moonlight Shuriken. Other than that, this is looking pretty typical. Of course, the 4 energy switch is something that's not going to be included in most Roaring Moon deck lists. I think Roaring Moon deck lists without the water energy can probably play a couple of energy switch if you want, but it doesn't really make as much sense if you're not playing the full 3 waters to play the full 4 energy switches. And next we have some Snorlax stall deck lists. I wanted to make sure we took a good look at these, especially because the 8-0 Snorlax stall deck list was unavailable. This looks very, very, I'll say North American. There's 0 energy cards in it. That's kind of how we've been seeing Snorlax at OnPlayLimitlessTCG.com events. This is pretty much the norm for Snorlax stall. If you asked me to create a standard 60 for Snorlax stall, it'd probably look like this, except maybe not the 3 Misfortune Sisters. Probably have a Zerosix Machinations in there instead. But let's move on and look at one with a lot of energies. This one's playing 5 energy cards, which is not the norm compared to the Snorlax stall lists we're used to from like the North American meta from World Championships. Something I've never seen before, I actually had to look this card up, is the Diancie. It looks like it's coming out in Stellar Crown, and it has the Diffuse Reflection attack for 1 energy. It does 40 damage for each special energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon in play. So this looks like it's probably a Lugia counter of some sorts to try to at least have a better time against Lugia with this deck. But other than that, yeah, they are playing the 2 fighting energy so that you can attack with Cornerstone. They're not playing any Luminous or Psychic to attack with the Mimikyu. But then the double turbo, the mist energy, the jet energy, probably all to make use of the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon as an attacker. And then for their A-Spec of choice, they're playing the Survival Brace, which if your Pokemon was at full health and it's knocked out by an attack's damage, it'll now just go to 10 HP instead of being knocked out, and then you lose the tool card. So a good card to for like survivability, especially if you are attacking with these Pokemon. The energy attachment surviving through for another turn can be all the difference with the Survival Brace. And then one more Snorlax stall deck list. This one is looking a little bit more normal, kind of like from 2 sets ago when the Chi-Yu EX plus 2 fire energy was more normal to play. And I think, again, that's important in the Japanese tournament environment where it's best of 1, no ties. The Chi-Yu EX being able to mill out your opponent can force the game to progress a little bit more. we're almost done. There were a lot of 7-in-1 deck lists to look through, a lot of different archetypes. This is Venomoth Frostlass. So of course Venomoth, the first attack doing 30 damage and item lock the opponent, and then Frostlass spreading damage between each turn onto all Pokemon except Frostlasses that have abilities. We've seen Frostlass decks before, typically with like Monkey Dory, sometimes Greninja EX, sometimes with Mawile. He'll try to lock things while Frostlass spreads damage around. I think I've seen something like this around before. I've definitely seen Venomoth decks. Venomoth is an interesting choice of Pokemon to go with the item lock if you're not going with Banette EX. And then as for new cards, they're just playing one of that Gravity Orb that can increase the retreat cost of both Pokemon in the active position. And for a spec choice, going with the Neutralization Zone, potentially just walling out the opponent's damage. Then to close out our deck lists for today, we've got 3 Charizard EX deck lists. This first one, we've got looking pretty typical, the 4-1-3 line of Charizard, 2-1-2 line of Pidgeot, so playing that Pidgeotto to better combat TMD evolution tactics, and also to go along with that A-Spec they're playing, the new Tree A-Spec. So the Great Big Tree is a new A-Spec stadium. It reads, once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a Stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from one of their basic Pokemon in play, and put it onto that Pokemon. If they do, they may search their deck for a Stage 2 Pokemon that evolves from that Stage 1, and put that onto play, and you can't use this to evolve a basic Pokemon during your first turn, or on a Pokemon that was just put into play. So, if you've just played down your Pidgey, or it's turn 1 going first, turn 1 going second, you can't use the Great Big Tree to super evolve all the way up into Pidgeot EX. You could also do this for Duskull or Charmander, but the best use is probably for the Pidgeot EX. So, but if it's turn 2, the Pidgey's already been down for a turn, you can use this to just go straight up into Pidgeot EX, which can be really, really powerful. As for other new cards, they're just playing the new Briar supporter, which is a very, very good supporter card, being able to allow Charizard EX to take an extra prize card when knocking something out if the opponent's at exactly 2 prize cards. In this next Charizard EX deck list, also finishing with the same record, we see that they are not playing the Great Big Tree, so in turn they are not playing the Pidgeotto. They're playing Unfair Stamp as their A-Spec of choice, also running the Dusclops, Dusknoir, Duskull line, also running the new Briar supporter card. So these things are looking to be pretty standard across the board in Charizard EX deck lists. And then for the final Charizard EX deck list, this one is playing Prime Catcher, not playing the new Briar, not playing Pidgeotto, because of course we see there's no Great Big Tree, no TM evolution. Interestingly, they are playing a 2-1-2 line of the Dusclops line, so 2 Duskull, 1 Dusclops, 2 Dusknoir. The second Dusknoir is something that's interesting to me. We don't typically see that in the Charizard EX Pidgeot lists. And then the one other interesting thing they're doing here is playing a Thornton, but no Briar in here, playing Thornton as their kind of utility supporter of choice. So those are all of the 8-0 and 7-1 archetypes deck list shared for all of them from this scramble battle that Japan had as a pre-Champions League tournament. I hope you enjoyed today's analysis of what is winning in Japan and with these new Stellar Crown cards included. If you'd like to see more content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and also check out links in the description down below for ways to support my content. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.